Jamie, is there anything that you are thinking of going into this year?
Well, one of the things I mentioned before this call was I could talk a little bit about a strategy that I've seen working sort of like towards the tail end of 2024. I put out like a newsletter on Friday, and I ended up like 6 different emails of people saying like, this is amazing. And we're really, really happy with it. And someone actually saying that they'd started to implement this strategy before they'd read my email over the last few months. And they've actually got more subscribers from the community tab than they have from their actual videos, which is quite interesting. You know, YouTube's a video platform. You're getting more subs from non-video content on YouTube. Like that's extreme, right? Like that's not common. So if you're doing both, it's quite impressive. So for those who haven't seen the newsletter or the YouTube video, I basically started implementing this strategy onto one of my clients, and I've since done it with like 2 or 3 others. And they've all seen an increase in their impressions. They've seen it in terms of their boost in likes and new subscribers. And you know, I think it's quite an underrated strategy at the moment because a lot of people aren't using the community tab. When I was making this YouTube video, I was looking, you know, to all of the big creators to see who's actually using this and who's not. And like, you go look at your MKBHD, your Casey Neistat, none of them are using it. Like some of them.
I'm so on edge, Jamie. Tell me what it is.
But a lot of them with the community tab, like the last post that they had made was 11 months ago, some of them over 2 years ago. And it's like, wow, why not? Like, you should be doing this. And so with the community tab, if you're not using it at the moment, I think you should probably start no matter your size, because it's one of those areas that right now is underused. And so if you post to it, the chances are your post is going to break out into a new audience. So I have the article here, which I'm just going to like glance at as I go through this. But if you've never used a community tab before, it's essentially a tab on everyone's channel page. Just think of it like a Facebook feed or a Twitter feed or something like that. Like it's basically a social media feed where you can post text, posts, polls, images, even link off to other videos. And these posts get promoted in the YouTube app, essentially in the feed. So as you're scrolling down and you're seeing all of the different videos on the homepage, occasionally you will stumble across a community tab post from a creator that has posted. And so I've seen a lot of people having really good results with this. And one of my clients, GrowVeg, who I've mentioned a few times before, they had put out 2 different posts that were milestone posts. So when they hit 500k subs and when they hit 600k subs, they put out an image saying, you know, thanks so much for subscribing, basically celebrating what they'd hit. And they got over like 3,000 likes, a ton of comments, and the impressions were like crazy. And I thought, wow, that's a lot of people who are seeing this post that if they hadn't posted it, just would never have thought about GrowVeg. And the reaction to that post when it was basically about the creator, you know, it was about them celebrating rather than providing value. I thought, what would happen if they started to post to the community tab with valuable information about gardening that they could learn from? And so I basically went through this process of looking at content buckets in which they could create a variety of different posts. So I said we could have a video teaser, which is where we would hype sort of the upcoming video. So on the Saturday, if the video was to release, we would start publishing on the Monday. Then on the Tuesday, we would put out an engaging poll that was relevant to that video and its topic. So if we were talking about, let's say, you know, what's your favorite vegetable to grow in that you want to grow this year in 2025, as an example. And we had a video releasing on the Saturday saying, here, these are the 7 best vegetables to grow this year. Putting up that poll on the Tuesday is going to get people thinking about it, voting, talking in the comments and debating about what vegetable that they think is the best to sort of grow that year. And so it starts to prime them for that video's release. And then on a Wednesday, we'll do a behind the scenes photos. So I've personally found that on YouTube, photos do way better on the community tab than linking out to other videos and for using text. So I discovered this like a few years ago when I was posting to Ali's community tab. We'd post videos, it'd maybe get like 30 likes, sometimes 300. wouldn't really do well. But the second we post a photo, we'd get over like 6,000, 7,000 likes. It was like a huge difference. And you could just scroll down and see this happening over and over again. So it's quite easy to see this pattern. And so we started to do this with GrowVeg, and it was the exact same thing. Like, photos are crucial on the community tab if you really want to get the impressions from YouTube. The next content bucket was a Throwback Thursday. So I quite like to use this community tab post to either point back to a relevant video that is going to get them hyped again for the video on the Saturday, or to essentially just use it as a Throwback Thursday and revive an older video that might be relevant at that time of year, just to kind of like kickstart it and get people watching again. And then on the 5th day, it's a quick tip. And the way that I've been doing this is using a ChatGPT prompt, which I created, where I would essentially paste the YouTube script if we've written it, or I will copy and paste the transcript from the video into ChatGPT, and I'll say, create 3 different polls with an engaging question that will cause a debate on the topic, and then I'll insert the topic there. Or sometimes I'll say the YouTube video's title with our audience of, in this case, it would be gardeners, and then provide 4 answers to choose from. And so that allows us to create a variety of different polls, which I can then select and schedule on the community tab. And I also do that with the quick tip. And I actually have an entire document on my website listing all of these different prompts for each of these content buckets. So it makes it really easy to produce this content. And once we had scheduled all of these, we actually saw that we were getting more 1 of 10s every single upload because people were ready to watch it. And we were getting loads of comments from people on the community tab saying, I'm so excited for this video coming out this week. And we would list, the day and the time that it was releasing with all the different time zones around the world. And it just worked really well for us. We started off doing this only 3 days a week. And we've now moved up to daily posts on the community tab because it's driving so much growth for them. And like I said, I then experimented with different clients and it was the exact same thing. So I think moving over towards a strategy where you're creating like text content and image content on the community tab is great because it also allows you to simultaneously post to LinkedIn, X, Facebook, your newsletter, wherever. So it's kind of like quite useful, I think, because it's definitely not going to harm your channel. It's only going to help it.
Interesting. I'm definitely going to, the thing that catches my attention most is the idea of hyping up videos before they go out. I have not experimented with the premiere feature on YouTube where you tell people exactly when the video is going out and that they can set a reminder or whatever. Have you done anything like that at all, Jamie?
I've done it, but I've not really tracked it to see sort of how it performs. My gut instinct is I don't really like it unless it's for a specific reason. I think depending on the video, it makes sense. But I think for the average video to have this premiere, probably not useful. A lot of people spend their energy talking in the live chat, which then do not become comments. And so I kind of like the idea of people being more considerate and thoughtful about watching a piece of content and then writing a comment that they've thought about, as opposed to just writing things as it's happening on screen. But I don't know, I as far as I'm aware, I don't see the videos perform better because there was a bunch of live comments. And I don't know, I just think that whenever I clicked on a video that was interesting to me and it was a premiere, it's kind of frustrating to join and you're 8 minutes into a 15-minute video. I want to watch it from the very beginning, which I can obviously drag back and watch, but it's just this weird thing. I don't know. I just personally don't like premieres that much.
The one thing that makes me have second thoughts about using it is the idea that because it's kind of advertised to people before it goes live, right? This thing will be coming out at such and such a time. And it kind of gives people, it steals the element of surprise to some extent. If it's something like I have a huge announcement,
yeah, that's why I think for those types of videos where there's an announcement or I think, where it could work very well as a trailer. If there was a movie trailer coming out for an anticipated movie, Premiere would work perfectly. But I think for the average YouTuber who's just putting out videos, no one cares that your 7 tips to whatever, it comes out at 3 p.m. on Sunday. No one's putting that in their calendar, really.
In fact, if you say 7 tips for growing pumpkins or whatever, and people see they need to wait an hour to see it, that gives them the chance to like a read it later app, think, do I really want to watch this video, instead of just clicking? And secondly, it gives them the chance to go and find that information elsewhere if you're an educational YouTuber.
Yeah, that's fair.
So George, I know you've been working with a new channel recently. Anything that you're going to be focusing on going into 2025? Anything you want to change?
Yeah, good question. So, I mean, there are kind of two things that I wanted to talk about. One would be this new channel that I'm working with external to me, and one would be my own channel, because there are a couple of things that I want to change in both regards this year. And we were saying just before the call, it feels like there's a need to say, it's a new year. We have all these, like, a box full of new strategies that's going to revolutionize how you do YouTube. And in reality, I think a lot of the stuff that I'm thinking about are some really, really simple tweaks, which are hopefully going to create more output and better output. So yeah, I mean, to start off, I'll talk about the channel I'm working with. We maybe mentioned some of the content we're working on this podcast before, but broadly speaking, the channel has been very, very focused on a particular kind of niche of content. So they're in the kind of the tech space, the software space, and their main value prop is like helping people who are in that particular niche, which is good. And there's always this toss up, right, between, do you want to make videos that blow up and go crazy and get you 1 million views, or do you want to make videos that still get lots of views but are really, really valuable for the business that is kind of behind the YouTube channel? And this particular channel is very much focused on the business side of things. But one of the major tweaks that I've been trying to make with this channel is basically implementing once maybe it's every quarter, maybe it's every month. It kind of depends how fast we can get the production process, but experimenting with something that kind of treads that line between the two. So there's a video that's coming out very shortly, which maybe I'll end up talking about at some point on the podcast, which is this kind of big swing idea that made me want to work with this channel in the first place. When looking at their channel initially, it was like there's clear expertise behind what they're doing, and they're hitting a very particular niche very, very well. But what are the types of videos we could make that still do that, but then also massively expand the target audience and allow potentially new viewers, new customers to come in? So from like a broad perspective, I don't know if you guys want to kind of take the reins from here for a bit, but like that's something that I'm really keen on implementing, is making sure that once every so often we're doing a video that goes well beyond the kind of the niche and takes a big swing, tries to get new people in.
Agreed. I think it's really important to reset every now and then, and instead of getting ultra focused on the things that make you excited and make, honestly, the people who are commenting all the times on your videos excited, and that little the core audience to just like expand as much as possible, even if it's just an experiment. And I think that can maybe feel inauthentic sometimes. So I don't know, asking a gardener to dumb it down and expand their reach into like, why should you have a garden? It might seem obvious to them, but it's gonna get a lot of new people excited.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point. I think it's also with these types of videos, and obviously everyone will approach YouTube in a very different way, especially from a financial perspective. But the way that we're approaching this type of video is that because we know that the stakes are potentially higher, we are spending more time on the edit. We are, investing more time in getting the thumbnail just right. Whereas for something that your audience is likely to click on anyway, I think potentially there's not so much the need to go like all out on all these areas when you're thinking, right, I know my core audience, I know this type of thumbnail appeals to them, blah, 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 blah. Certainly, I mean, maybe you guys would push back, but the way we're certainly approaching this one is like, we want this to be one of the like flagship videos for the channel. We want this to be the Ali Abdaal, here's how I make $15,000 a week by being a productivity nerd type videos that most people find the channel through and would like trace back where they first saw the channel to that video. So if it's like, it's a weird conscious choice when you're like, yes, I want this to be one of those videos. You then have to, you at least in our case, we're trying to put more time and more effort into like those final tweaks, where maybe with some other videos that are just for your core audience, that last like 20% wouldn't necessarily be worth it.
Yeah, I think with a lot of people, whenever they say, I want to create a flagship video, their mindset immediately, 10x's, and they think about things a little bit differently. They take their time. Is this actually, what we need to be doing in the edit? And it usually pays off when you really put in a lot more effort, you do come out with a much better video. But obviously there's the risk that you put in all of this time and it doesn't perform.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking. But yeah, I think for like most people who are sort of past like the 50K subs, they've got a bit of an audience. If you're essentially a YouTuber because you have a business and you want customers and leads and things like that, I think like the correct approach at the minute is to kind of like split your channel into thirds. And so you would have 1/3 of your videos is essentially like what you said, your broad videos. These are the videos that are there to appeal to as many people as possible. It's to get new blood into the channel, new viewers. And like what Gwilym said, you go broad of like, why would you need a garden? You're going to get people in who might be more interested. The second third of that, which is the more narrow videos, which is here's how you specifically make, a garden that gets you the perfect tomatoes or something like that, right? You need to go more narrow because you're sort of appealing to the intermediate and advanced users, viewers, I should say. And those are the people who will buy from you. Depending on what it is that you're selling. And you need to be able to create valuable content for things. I think if you always stick to the beginners and the broad videos, you might get the views, but it doesn't necessarily translate to business. And the creators that I've worked with who've kind of like done that approach of both end up seeing more business made from the more narrow niche down videos. But you can't just stay there forever. Like people will eventually find other YouTubers. They don't find that topic particularly interesting. So you've always got to create the broad. And I think especially if you're a business YouTuber or someone who helps people, it's more like case studies for that final third. I think if you do broad, narrow, and case studies where you actually prove that you know what you're talking about and the results of your paid products, that I think is a nice strategy for most people to kind of like build their audience around. Because you're kind of like tapping everyone who could potentially be interested in you and your services or your products. But I think that's why I say when you're about 50K subs, you've got a bit of momentum behind you. I think if you implement that too soon, sometimes it might not work out, in getting new people onto the channel. You probably want to be focusing on more broad content.
I like that. I find it interesting the process of how do you get to the point where you're like, this is one of these canonical big videos for the channel. Do you start off, in my experience, I don't start off thinking we need to have a big video, what's it going to be? But it's more like we have ideas and then one pops out at you and you're like, this could be great.
I think that the way to do it is to like fire then aim. I think I don't want to like scare George, but you're definitely aiming then firing in terms of like, this is what we think is going to make for a good video. And you're putting a lot of energy into lining up that shot and it might not hit the bullseye, right? I think usually if you're shooting and you're uploading loads of videos, like Gwilym said, you're kind of seeing what's resonating across like 15 videos. We can take a bit of each, create what we then think is the ultimate video, and then, hit the bullseye.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point. I think in this case, it's kind of like a practicality perspective where at the current moment, like the channel is kind of, is not, the infrastructure isn't in place and with the business that they're running in the background to be uploading as regularly as we would need to do that. So it's basically trying to take an in-between approach where the content that has been made on this channel so far and the sorts of comments that we see on the channel indicate that this is the type of thing that people will hopefully go for. I think the other way that we're thinking about it, and again, maybe if we're firing, we're aiming before firing, then this is all null and void anyway. But the other way we thought about this, and that I thought about it when I was pitching them on this idea, is that the focus is, what is their spiky point of view? What is the thing that they say that very few people are saying? So in the case of, I think this is probably a point from a Paddy Galloway interview, but certainly with his thing, he's talked about Ramit Sethi in the past. Ramit's spiky point of view is you should rent, not buy, even though he's a millionaire. He could definitely buy a house. He doesn't. That's, inherently kind of interesting. And I think that's kind of the approach we've taken with this. And like when I first started working with them, it was like, what are the things that, what are your spiky points of view? And there are really like one or two that they have, which do go against the grain of the industry that they're in, broadly speaking. But that there's this kind of undercurrent of people who also kind of agree with that thing, but no one's really saying it, except in their comment section. So that's that's how we thought about it. But you're right. Let's see. Maybe we luck out and aiming before firing works out on this occasion. Maybe it wouldn't every time. But I do take your point. I think that's a good way of doing it.
Quick aside, in terms of being combative, this reminds me of something our friend Gordon is always saying, which is like, if you want to make waves, like pick a fight, take a hard, spiky stance on something. And I was scripting a video for Ramit like just last week. And so I've been deep in the weeds of how he talks and thinks and communicates his points. And often he is doing this thing of almost in a humorous way, picking a fight with you. You think this, some other people think that. What the hell is wrong with you? You should be doing this instead. But it all feels very supportive. But
it takes the edge off slightly. So it doesn't feel like I'm being attacked,
He's very friendly, but antagonistic, which is, I think, something to think about if you are in a space where, for example, you're comparing different tools or you're a reviewer or something like that.
That video was great, by the way. I was watching it thinking like, are these little injections from Gwilym directly, or is this Ramit, or is it a bit of both? But I thought those moments in particular stood out, where he'll be like, no, you should listen to the nice man on the internet who's telling you to blah, 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 blah. Like that stuff is great. And like you say, Jamie, it makes you feel supported, but also, there's a bit of tough love there as well, which incidentally is kind of how Brian Johnson's social media comes across as well.
Okay, new point, which is something that's been on my mind a bit. And I've seen it with a lot of the channels I work with. I guess this will resonate with you guys as well. Being lazy with packaging, where you have a certain amount of assets or you have formats that you're sort of used to that already kind of work. And you approach the thumbnail more from the perspective of, what have we got? What can we make work? As opposed to clean slate, what is the best possible thumbnail that we could do, regardless of how much effort it would take to get a custom photo shot?
Yeah, I had some thoughts because I've worked with a number of clients over the years now, and I like to think of a winning concept and then go and take the photos for it with the purpose of designing it and how it was agreed. Sometimes that's not possible because forgot to take the photos on the shoot. It's not that time of the year, so we actually can't get these photos in this particular location, or, if it's a travel video or something like that, like we're no longer there, so we can't take that photo. So there's these limitations. That for me can be a little bit frustrating because it's like, we have this amazing idea, but we can't execute it because we don't have the resources. And usually it goes down to, let's look in the archives. What can we find online? And usually it's never as good as what it could have been. I have seen a number of times where that doesn't necessarily result in the best amount of views for that video for what it could have been. Especially when the content's really good, but it's like the packaging kind of sucks. Like no one's clicking on this to watch it. But I do think that it's better to actually kind of combine the 2 points. So I think you are way more creative when you actually limit yourself, as you're saying, to like 4 or 5 assets that you might have access to. But I think you do that prior to like the brainstorming of the idea. So it's kind of like you're limited in what you can do in terms of strategy, which forces you to be extra creative, and then you go and execute it, as opposed to, we've got this strategy and we've only got like a couple of assets and now we need to create something in Photoshop. I think if it works like that, it tends to be okay because we've got these creative constraints on us that really make us think outside of the box.
I like that a lot. That you don't feel like you're wasting your time by coming up with lots of fancy ideas and where you could have been more effective using the stuff you already have. Yeah, because and I think this is part of it. Usually it's only in the process of thinking through what could we do with what we've got that you really hit upon the gem of an idea where you really need them on top of Mount Everest holding like a Coke can. And there's like, the thing that's missing, I find, is some sense of like 3D-ness, some like depth that I'm getting tired of people's spaces being slapped onto something, a fake hand in front of them and them holding something that's also been slapped on, or people with graphics in front of them. it's starting to feel a little bit dated compared to, say, someone like Life of Reza, often solo creators who do these more elaborate photo shoots where they're in an actual location that looks interesting and inviting. Huge caveat though, I suspect we're going to see more AI coming in where you can take Ramit Sethi or whatever, you've got your AI model of the person and it'll be photorealistic and you can do whatever you want with that avatar and no more photo shoots.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot more AI thumbnails that are coming out and they're getting much, much better. I think it's coming, but I do think you're going to have the pushback to that. And as you say, Gwilym, if you go back to like 2019, little icons, like a lot of the productivity study YouTubers at the time we were doing it, mostly popularized by Ali Abdaal, which was like Notion icon in a bubble here, Calendly icon in a bubble here. Like this was really good at the time. No one really knew this sort of to make this sort of style. And that's what I think helped those videos blow up. Now everyone does it. Everyone's doing Alex Hormozi stood in front of a blackboard or a whiteboard, writing things out. I agree. I think like you're probably going to see people do the opposite of that now and kind of think, how can we take most of this in camera and be more realistic, especially as beginners and those who don't know how to create good thumbnails rely on AI. And so it becomes sort of the norm. I think it's kind of like how AI has allowed loads of people to use, ChatGPT to write tweets and blog posts. And it like you can just spot it a mile off now. Whereas the people who are actually writing themselves with their own thoughts, the writing's not as polished as what you might get from AI, but it's way more engaging to read. I think that's kind of behavior is going to apply to thumbnails where we kind of think, you know what, let's just go back to square one. Let's show something that looks realistic and is not over the top. That's not like AI exaggerating. And I think we might end up seeing people get more views that way, but who knows? We'll see what happens this next year.
So Gwilym, is there anything in particular that we haven't talked about that you are thinking about in terms of how you're approaching your client strategy this year?
So a more kind of meta approach is if you're working, if you got a channel or you're working on a channel and spending most of your time on it, something I found useful is to just almost as a thought experiment, think, if I was a consultant and I was called in to look at this channel, what would I say? What would be my teardown of it? Because if you're in the weeds and you're thinking, how can we improve? How can I improve? Often you've got a voice in your head that's saying like, oh yeah, but like then in order to actually make that improvement, we need to do this and that. If you stop that and you just imagine, what does an outside person say without knowing how my processes currently work? And they might say, mate, your thumbnails, they're all kind of below par, or compare your intros to the intros of the most successful people in your niche. Are they really, up to scratch? Or it helps so much to have that perspective. I think there's a concept in music practice. Some people say you should practice as if no one is listening. But then other people say you should practice as if a master musician is next to you listening and thinking about what you're playing, because that forces you to up your game basically and not make excuses. I've been finding that useful, just imagining what would a consultant say.
Yeah, because I suppose there are probably some assumptions you fall into, whether they're actually reasonable or not, about like improvements that can be made and things that we can actually do. That if you were to be challenged on it by someone else, if you were told you have to find a creative solution to X or Y thing, you'd suddenly do it. So yeah, I like that approach.
Yeah, that's something I've done for years now in terms, not to do with YouTube consultancy, but whenever I'm faced with like a business problem or something like that, I always say, what would Tim Ferriss do? What would Naval do? And it's just weird. It kind of just puts you, it's like a mental hack that just reframes it. And you start thinking a little bit like them. I find that really useful. Like, for me, it's always really good if I feel like I'm hitting a wall. It just allows me to kind of break out of my thinking patterns and see it from a new perspective. And sometimes it's, not useful, but the majority of the times it really is. So that's kind of interesting to hear, your approach.
George, any thoughts bubbling away in your mind?
No, not really. I mean, yeah, likewise, haven't experimented with the Premiere thing. I just had some potentially closing remarks if we think we're kind of done with everything else, just about my own thing and just a quick tip on creating a bias to action. So I have been wanting to get back into doing my own YouTube stuff for ages. I made one video last year, which was just prompted by me closing my agency. And I thought that would be interesting to talk about. And it was a oneer. Well, actually, I shot it about 20 times, but it was like one continuous, like no cuts kind of thing. But I've been wanting to do it for ages, and I've struggled, like I think a lot of people do, to actually take action on it. And the feeling of like, oh, I just can't think of the right topic and blah, blah, blah. Like all this stuff that you tell people not to do, all this stuff that doesn't seem to bother you when you're working with clients. But when it comes to your own thing, I know you've talked about this, Jamie, in the past, that it's like sometimes just really hard to kick yourself up the butt and make yourself do something for you. But the way that I have gone about fixing this, well, two things. The first is that I have created a forcing function in my own life, which in my case is my script writing community. I've introduced a script writing, like group script writing session, which is a regular thing that's going to happen probably twice a month, potentially more. Like it could be quite ad hoc, but it's a 2-hour session where we sit down and anyone who wants to come can come, and we write a YouTube script. And this is something I wanted to introduce for them, but I realized the reciprocal value for me is just as great, and did the first one just before the holidays and sat down, and 2 hours later I had a script that was more or less ready to go. Which is now, I'm going to be filming it in a couple of weeks. The second thing, and I think the thing that I think has been holding me back for ages, and I think is a thing that I've said thing so many times, that needs to be unpicked, it is the idea that I couldn't find a fun way to do it. If I was honest with myself, the fire in my stomach wasn't there to make content that was just, okay, what if I turned all my newsletters about script writing into videos about script writing? It just wasn't getting me enough. Like that's my day job. That's what I spend all my time doing. I love doing it, but as a thing that's going to be like an entirely separate project, am I enthusiastic? Probably not. And the way that I was able to switch that was thinking, how could I make this a really, really interesting video every time that I was excited to go and film? And in my case, I created this sort of rule in my head that I have to do something extreme or unexpected or just generally fun for me in every single video. So the first video that I've written, I'm going to be paragliding off of a mountain right at the very, very end. I've checked, they have paragliding where I'm going. It's booked, and that's now happening. I'm taking my little selfie stick with me, and the whole video is going to be filmed while skiing, and that just gets me excited. But it might be something like, there's another one where I'm thinking, we saw a place in Ireland that's called, is it called Ballybunion? I think it's called Ballybunion. And I love the name so much that this thing has come into my head where I'm like, I want to like casually reference the place that's called Ballybunion. And then in the next shot, I'm in Ballybunion. I've just bloody gone there. And that for me is like, it's fun. It now incorporates elements of travel. It incorporates elements of like a bit of weird comedy, a bit of the unexpected, whatever. But that kind of thing, suddenly I know that I can incorporate script writing into that somehow. I can find a metaphor or whatever. That's the thing that now makes me want to go and do it. So I think in terms of getting yourself to actually make more content this year, it's just about stepping back and asking yourself, if I'm not doing it, what is the friction? Is that friction that I'm just generally not excited and the idea of being a YouTuber sounds more fun than actually the content I think I should make? And if so, what is the thing that I can do to fix that?
Have you heard of the YouTuber Jay Foreman?
Yeah.
Yeah, like his whole vibe is that where he'll say a place and then he's just suddenly there.
Yeah, I think he went to my uni actually.
Yeah, he has really good videos. Like he's kind of like a Tom Scott-esque guy, been around for like 10, 15 years. He makes loads of videos about like London and the UK, sort of like what happened to Old London Bridge. Tower Bridge could have looked very different. Why are there no bridges in East London? And it's always really comical. I watched one the other day where he's like, if only someone had spoken to the bridge commissioner, and then it cuts to him and he's like on the Thames and he's like, why did you not do this? And it's like the bridge commissioner stood there with like the uniform on, and it cuts away and he's back in the office talking. It's like he did all of that for that 3-second joke, so like, I love those kind of videos. They always do so well. So I think if you go down that path, it's definitely setting you up for success.
I also like how this is part of the George video making DNA. Like Jamie and I have been part of a video where you threw a pair of headphones at Jamie, then jumped into a swimming pool and
nearly broke my nose in the process.
You've done this improv comedy.
Yes,
and
actually. So Jay Foreman was in the improv troupe that I was in a few years before me. That's why I think I'd heard of him before I even knew of him on YouTube. So yeah.
Maybe it's like go back to your roots. What have you enjoyed doing in the past?
That's I hadn't even thought of it in that way, but I think that's totally right.
And with that, thank you for watching this episode of Making It. Goodbye.
See you.